The photo sits on the mantelpiece like a loaded gun, tucked behind a vase of white orchids where no one thinks to look. In it, I'm holding a set of keys, grinning like I just won the lottery, which in a way, I did. My name is Natasha, and today I'm hosting Thanksgiving dinner in what my family believes is my roommate's house. They have no idea I'm the one who bought this $4 million Brooklyn brownstone with cash. Natasha, honey, where should I put my coat? My mother's voice carries that familiar edge of judgment as she steps into the foyer. Lorelei has perfected the art of making every question sound like criticism. The closet's right there, Mom. I gesture toward the mahogany armoire I had custom built last spring. She runs her manicured fingers along the carved details. Your roommate certainly has exquisite taste. What does she do again? Investment consulting? The lie rolls off my tongue like silk. Jennifer and I rehearsed this months ago. How fortunate for you to live somewhere so elevated. Mum's eyes sweep the vaulted ceilings, the restored hardwood floors, the original crown moulding that cost me $30,000 to repair. Such a step up from that dreadful studio apartment. My father appears behind her, his retired judge posture as rigid as ever. Walker takes in the space with the calculating gaze he once reserved for defendants. Impressive place, he admits grudgingly. Rent must be astronomical. I manage. I smile sweetly, the same smile I've worn through years of their disappointment. Riley breezes in next, her engagement ring catching the light from the crystal chandelier. My older sister has always known how to make an entrance. Her fiancé, Maurice, trails behind, checking his phone. Tash! Riley air kisses my cheek. This place gets more gorgeous every time I see it. You're so lucky your roommate lets you host here. Lucky, the word tastes bitter in my mouth. Where is the mysterious roommate anyway? Maurice asks, finally looking up from his screen. I'd love to meet the woman who can afford this palace. Jennifer's visiting family in Portland. Another rehearsed line. In reality, she's upstairs in the guest room, ready to play her part if needed. Brian bounds through the door like an overgrown puppy, immediately gravitating toward the bar cart I stocked with top-shelf liquor. Holy shit, Nat, this place screams money. My younger brother pops open a bottle of champagne that costs more than most people's rent. Your roommate single? Asking for a friend. Language, Brian. Mum's disapproval is automatic. Sorry, Ma, but seriously, Nat, you hit the roommate jackpot. What's she like? Some tech heiress? Wall Street princess? I pour myself a glass of wine, a 2015 Bordeaux from my personal collection. She's very private. Private and loaded, Brian grins. The dream combo. Dad settles into the leather armchair I bought because it reminded me of his old study, back when I was still welcome in it. Well, whoever she is, she's given you quite the opportunity. This is certainly more appropriate than those art shows you used to do. The dismissal in his voice is casual, practiced. Like my decade of creative work was just an embarrassing phase we're all pretending never happened. Those art shows paid my bills, I say quietly. Barely, Mum interjects. Thank goodness you found more stable living arrangements. Stable. If only they knew how stable 6 figures in crypto gains could be. Riley examines the dining room table, set with bone china and crystal that cost more than her car payment. This is stunning, Nat. Very sophisticated. You've really learned to present things properly. Present things properly. As if I'd been some feral creature before, incapable of basic social graces. Dinner's almost ready, I announce, retreating toward the kitchen before I say something I'll regret. The kitchen is my sanctuary. Marble countertops, professional-grade appliances, and a wine fridge stocked with bottles that would make a sommelier weep. I check the turkey, golden and perfect in the oven I dreamed of owning since culinary school. The school I couldn't afford because Dad cut off my funding when I refused law school. Need help? Riley appears in the doorway. I've got it handled. You always do. She leans against the counter. I have to admit, I was worried about you for a while. After the whole family blow-up, when Dad stopped helping with your expenses, I thought you might really struggle. Struggle? I did struggle. I ate ramen for months while building my crypto portfolio. I sold paintings on street corners while learning about NFTs. I worked 3 jobs while my family wrote me off as a failure. But look at you now, Riley continues, living in this incredible place, hosting dinner like a proper adult. I'm proud of you for landing on your feet. Landing on my feet. Like I stumbled into success instead of clawing my way to it. Thanks, I manage. The timer chimes. Turkey's done. I pull it from the oven, golden and glistening, and carry it to the dining room where my family waits around the table I bought, in the house I own, eating the meal I paid for. They think I'm lucky to be here. They have no idea. The carving knife glides through the turkey like butter. Each slice falls perfectly onto the serving platter while my family settles around the table, their voices filling the dining room with familiar chatter. This smells incredible, Brian says, already reaching for the wine. Seriously, Nat, when did you become such a domestic goddess? YouTube University, I reply, arranging the meat on the platter. Riley laughs. At least you're putting that art degree to use somewhere. Presentation is everything. There it is, the first jab, delivered with a smile. Maurice adjusts his tie and surveys the spread. Impressive setup. Your roommate must be doing very well for herself. What kind of investment consulting? Cryptocurrency and digital assets, I say, passing him the cranberry sauce. The Wild West of finance. Dad cuts into his turkey with surgical precision. Risky business. Easy come, easy go. Some people know how to navigate risk, I reply. Mom dabs her lips with the linen napkin. Well, we're just grateful she's generous enough to let you use her beautiful home. This china is exquisite. Wedgwood? Royal Crown Derby. Of course it is. She examines the gold rim. Your roommate has impeccable taste. Very old money aesthetic. Brian grins. Speaking of money, Riley, how's the wedding planning going? Maurice's company going public must make things easier. Riley's face lights up. It's been amazing. We're looking at venues in the Hamptons now. Maurice's firm is projected to triple in value once the IPO hits. That's wonderful, sweetheart, Mom beams. A summer wedding in the Hamptons. How perfect. Maurice straightens in his chair. The tech sector's exploding right now. We're positioned to be major players. I've got investors lined up around the block. Investors love a good story, Dad nods approvingly. Success breeds success. Speaking of success, Brian turns to me with a mischievous grin. Nat, please tell me you're not still doing those weird digital art things. What were they called? NFTs. The table goes quiet. I set down my fork carefully. They're called non-fungible tokens, and yes, I still work in digital art. Riley exchanges a look with Mom. Honey, those were such a fad. Remember when everyone was buying pictures of monkeys for thousands of dollars? Thank goodness that bubble burst. The market corrected, I say evenly, but it didn't disappear. Maurice chuckles. The whole NFT thing was basically a pyramid scheme. A bunch of tech bros convincing people that JPEGs were investments. Anyone who got in early and got out fast made money, but most people lost their shirts. Some people made quite a bit, I reply. Sure, the scammers did. He takes a sip of wine. But for regular people, it was financial suicide. I feel bad for anyone who fell for that nonsense. Brian laughs. Remember when Nat tried to explain blockchain to us at Christmas? I thought she was speaking another language. Because you weren't listening. I was listening. You said something about mining and digital wallets and I thought you'd joined a cult. The laughter around the table feels sharp. I reach for my wine glass, my phone buzzing against my leg. A text from Jennifer upstairs. Everything okay down there? I can hear the condescension from the 3rd floor. Another text appears immediately after, this one from Caden. All deed copies delivered. Countdown, dessert. My heart rate picks up. I slide the phone back into my pocket. Natasha's always been creative, Mum says in that tone she uses when she's trying to be supportive but can't quite manage it. Remember her little art shows? So experimental. I sold pieces at those shows. Of course you did, dear. I just meant they were very niche. Dad clears his throat. The important thing is you've found stability now. This living situation seems much more appropriate for someone your age. Appropriate? Well, yes, you're 32, Natasha. It's time to think practically. This house, this lifestyle, it shows maturity, growth. Riley nods enthusiastically. Exactly. You're finally living like an adult. No more of that bohemian artist phase. Phase? You know what I mean. The struggling artist thing was fine in your 20s, but it wasn't sustainable. This is so much better. I stand up abruptly. I should check on dessert. Need help? Mum calls after me. I've got it. In the kitchen, I lean against the marble counter and breathe deeply. My phone buzzes again. Jennifer. Want me to come down and accidentally spill wine on someone? I almost smile. Almost. Instead, I open the drawer next to the sink. Inside, 7 cream-coloured envelopes sit in a neat row, each one labelled with a family member's name in my careful handwriting. My fingers trace the edge of my father's envelope. Natasha? Riley's voice comes from the doorway. Everything all right? Perfect. I close the drawer and turn around. Just getting the pumpkin pie ready. This has been lovely, really. You've outdone yourself. Have I? Absolutely. And I have to say, I'm proud of you for adapting, for finding a way to make things work after Dad had to cut you off. It couldn't have been easy. Had to cut me off, like it was some unavoidable tragedy instead of a choice. No, I say quietly, it wasn't easy. But look at you now. Living in this gorgeous house, hosting family dinners like a proper hostess, you've really turned things around. I pull the pie from the oven, golden and perfect. Yes, I really have. The pumpkin pie sits cooling on the counter while I arrange dessert plates on a silver tray. Each bite of dinner has been perfectly seasoned, not just with herbs and spices, but with years of accumulated resentment. Natasha, this meal was exceptional, Dad calls from the dining room. Please give our compliments to your roommate. Her kitchen is clearly well equipped. I'll be sure to tell her, I call back, sliding the pie server into my hand like a weapon. Back at the table, everyone's settled into that post-dinner contentment. Brian's loosened his tie, Riley's kicked off her heels under the table, and Maurice is scrolling through his phone again. So, Nat, Brian says as I set down the pie, level with us. Are you actually contributing to rent here, or are you basically a live-in house sitter? Brian, Mum scolds, but her eyes show she's curious too. What? It's a legitimate question. This place has to cost what, 15 grand a month? 20? No offence, but selling finger paintings doesn't exactly scream luxury rent money. Riley giggles. He has a point. I mean, we're all wondering how this arrangement works. Maybe she's doing Uber Eats on the side, Brian grins. Nothing wrong with the hustle. Got to pay the bills somehow. Maurice looks up from his phone. Actually, that's not a bad side gig. I know plenty of people in tech who drive for extra cash. The flexibility works well with creative schedules. Creative schedules? Dad repeats with a slight smile. Is that what we're calling unemployment now? The laughter ripples around the table. I cut into the pie, each slice precise and even. I'm not unemployed. Of course not, sweetheart, Mum says quickly. Your art is lovely, very expressive. Remember that painting you did of the melting clocks? Riley asks. Very Dali-esque, though I never quite understood what it was supposed to mean. It wasn't supposed to mean anything specific. Art doesn't always need to be literal. Maurice chuckles. See, that's the problem with the art world. Everything's so pretentious. It doesn't need to mean anything. Just admit you threw some paint on a canvas and called it deep. Maurice, Riley swats his arm playfully. Don't be mean. I'm not being mean, I'm being honest. The whole contemporary art scene is a scam. Rich people buying garbage because they think it makes them cultured. Brian raises his glass. Amen to that. Remember when that banana duct taped to a wall sold for like 100 grand? Insanity. That was performance art, I say, serving the first slice of pie. It was a banana, on a wall, with tape. Dad shakes his head. The fact that anyone paid money for that proves Morris's point. The art market is complex. The art market is a money laundering scheme, Morris interrupts. Rich people trading overpriced nonsense to avoid taxes. Your NFT thing was just the digital version of the same con. My hand tightens on the pie server. You seem to know a lot about something you just called a scam. I know enough to stay away from it, unlike some people who probably lost their life savings chasing digital fairy tales. Riley accepts her slice of pie. Let's not talk about money anymore. It's depressing. Natasha, this pie smells incredible. Did you make it from scratch? Everything's from scratch. Even the crust? Impressive. I can barely manage store-bought. Mum takes a delicate bite. Delicious. Your roommate is lucky to have such a talented cook living here. I'm sure she appreciates the home-cooked meals. I'm sure she does. Does she eat with you often? Dad asks. It seems odd that we've never met her. She travels frequently for work. How convenient, Brian smirks. The mysterious roommate who's never around, but somehow pays for this palace. My phone buzzes. Jennifer again. Should I make an appearance? I can be the eccentric heiress if needed. I type back quickly. Stay put, almost time. Who's texting? Riley peers over. Jennifer? Yes. Your roommate? Yes. Tell her we said thank you for letting us use her gorgeous home, Mum says, and that we'd love to meet her sometime. I'll pass that along. Maurice sets down his fork. You know what's funny? For someone who supposedly lives here, you seem awfully comfortable playing hostess. Most people would defer to the actual homeowner. The table goes quiet. Everyone's looking at me now. What do you mean? Riley asks. I mean, she's acting like she owns the place, hosting dinner, serving from her own dishes, playing lady of the manor. It's a bit presumptuous. Maurice, Riley's voice carries a warning. I'm just saying, if I was crashing at someone's place, I'd be a little more humble about it. Dad clears his throat. Perhaps we should be grateful that Natasha has found such accommodating living arrangements. Oh, I'm grateful, Maurice continues. I'm just curious about the dynamic. This whole setup seems very convenient. I stand up slowly, my chair scraping against the hardwood floor. Where are you going? Mum asks. To get something from the kitchen. Dessert wine, Brian suggests hopefully. Something like that. I walk to the kitchen, my heart pounding. In the drawer, the 7 envelopes wait like soldiers in formation. I pick them up, feeling their weight. When I return to the dining room, I'm carrying a small wooden box instead of wine. What's that? Riley asks. I place the box at the head of the table, right next to Dad's coffee cup. Dessert, I say simply. That's a very small pie, Brian jokes. I open the box. Inside, the 7 envelopes are arranged perfectly, each name visible in gold lettering. Actually, I say, pulling out the first envelope, I thought we'd try something different this year. I slide the first envelope across the polished table to Dad. His name gleams in gold script across the cream paper. What's this? He picks it up, turning it over in his hands. A little Thanksgiving tradition I wanted to start. I distribute the remaining envelopes, one by one. Mom, Riley, Maurice, Brian. Each envelope lands with a soft whisper against the table. Natasha, this is so sweet, Riley coos, examining her envelope. What is it? Gratitude letters. Something like that. Brian shakes his envelope next to his ear. Feels like papers. Please tell me it's not poetry. Remember your haiku phase? Just open them. Mum carefully breaks the wax seal on hers, ever mindful of presentation. Oh my, this is very formal. What lovely stationery. Dad slides his finger under the flap. Very mysterious, Natasha. You always did have a flair for the dramatic. One by one they extract the documents. The room fills with the soft rustle of unfolding papers. Riley opens hers first. Her eyes scan the page once, twice. The colour drains from her face. What is this? Keep reading. Maurice glances over at Riley's papers, then quickly opens his own envelope. His expression shifts from curiosity to confusion, to something approaching panic. This can't be right. Mum's hands tremble slightly as she reads. Natasha, I don't understand. What is this document? It's a property closing statement. Brian looks up from his papers, his usual grin replaced by bewilderment. Property closing for what? This house. The silence stretches like a taut wire. Dad sets his papers down carefully, his judge's training keeping his expression neutral even as his knuckles go white. These documents show you as the purchaser. That's correct. Riley's voice comes out as a whisper. You bought this house. Cash purchase, closed 6 months ago. Maurice laughs, but it sounds forced. This has to be some kind of joke, a prank or something. Check the second page. They flip through the documents. More silence, more rustling paper. There are 2 other properties listed here, Mum says faintly. A duplex in Park Slope and a condo in Manhattan. Also, cash purchases. Brian drops his papers like they're on fire. Holy shit, Nat! Are you serious right now? Language, Mum says automatically, but her heart isn't in it. Dad leans back in his chair, studying me with the same intensity he once reserved for hostile witnesses. How? Cryptocurrency, NFTs, digital art investments, everything you all dismissed as worthless. Riley's voice cracks. But you were broke. Dad cut you off. You were struggling. I was. For about 6 months, then I figured it out. Maurice shakes his head vigorously. This is impossible. The NFT market crashed. Everyone lost money. Everyone who got in late and panicked. I got in early. I got out smart. I diversified. But the amounts here. Mum stares at the papers. These properties are worth millions. 4.2 million for this house, 1.8 for the duplex, 2.6 for the Manhattan condo. The numbers hang in the air like smoke. $8.6 million, Dad says slowly. You're claiming you made $8.6 million selling digital art? Plus the liquid assets I kept, but yes, roughly that amount. Brian runs his hands through his hair. I don't understand. If you had this money, why didn't you say anything? Why let us think you were still struggling? Because you never asked, you assumed. Riley's eyes fill with tears. We thought we were helping you. Being supportive by including you, by letting you host here. Letting me host, in my own house. The words land like physical blows. Maurice crumples his papers. This is insane. You've been lying to us for months. I've been protecting myself. From what? Mum's voice rises. From your family? From your judgment, your pity, your condescension. Dad stands up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. You deliberately deceived us. I gave you exactly what you expected to see, a failure who needed rescuing. We never said you were a failure, Riley protests. You didn't have to say it. Maurice waves his papers in the air. So what is this? Some kind of gotcha moment? You wanted to humiliate us? I wanted to see how long you'd keep talking down to someone who could buy and sell you without blinking. The room erupts, everyone talking at once. Voices rising, overlapping, competing. This is cruel. Completely unnecessary. Why would you do this? Been lying to us for months. I walk to the front window and pull back the curtain. On the brownstone's front steps, exactly where I asked him to place it, sits a small wooden sign. There's something else you should see. They follow my gaze to the window. The real estate sign is small but unmistakable. For sale, historic Brooklyn brownstone. Riley gasps. You're selling? I turn back to face them, my family scattered around the dining room like debris after an explosion. I was just weighing my options. Sell the place. I pause, letting the silence build, or convert it into the very art gallery you all laughed at. The for sale sign gleams under the streetlight like a beacon. My family stares at it through the window, their reflections ghost-like in the glass. An art gallery? Dad's voice cuts through the silence. You'd turn a $4 million property into some vanity project? It wouldn't be vanity if it's profitable. Riley spins around from the window. Profitable? Natasha, art galleries fail all the time. You'd be throwing away everything you've earned. Would I? Or would I be investing in something I actually care about? Maurice crumples his property documents and tosses them on the table. This is exactly the kind of impractical thinking that got you cut off in the first place. What got me cut off was refusing to live the life you all planned for me. Mum sinks back into her chair, her composure finally cracking. We planned a stable life for you, security, respectability. You planned a life that made you comfortable. There's a difference. Brian picks up his wineglass with shaking hands. Okay, but seriously, Nat, why the whole charade? The fake roommate, the secrecy, this elaborate dinner setup, what was the point? The point was to see if anything had changed, if you'd treat me differently once you thought I'd found my place in your world. And? Riley's voice is barely a whisper. You didn't. You still talked down to me, still dismissed my work, still assumed I was lucky to be here instead of capable of earning it. Dad straightens his tie, falling back on his courtroom demeanour. So this entire evening was a test. A manipulation? Every family dinner is a test, Dad. I just decided to grade this one. That's not fair. Fair? I laugh, and it comes out sharper than I intended. Was it fair when you cut off my college funding because I wouldn't switch to pre-law? Was it fair when Mum told me to go starve with my finger paints? Mum flinches. I was angry. You were throwing away your future. I was choosing my future. There's a difference. Maurice stands up, pacing to the window. So what happens now? You've made your point. We're all thoroughly humiliated. What's the end game here? There is no end game. This is just the truth. The truth is, you've been lying to us for months, Riley's voice cracks, making us feel sorry for you while you were secretly richer than all of us combined. I never asked for your pity. You didn't exactly discourage it either. Brian sets down his glass hard enough to splash wine on the tablecloth. Jesus, Nat. Do you know how many times I offered to lend you money, how guilty I felt about not helping more? You offered $50 for groceries, Brian, once, because I thought that's all I could afford to help with. The room falls quiet, except for the ticking of the antique clock on the mantel, the clock I bought because it reminded me of the one in our childhood home. Mum dabs at her eyes with her napkin. I don't understand how you could let us go on thinking you were struggling. Watching us worry about you. Were you worried or were you embarrassed? Both, she admits quietly. Dad moves to the head of the table, his hands gripping the back of his chair. This vindictiveness isn't like you, Natasha. How would you know what I'm like? You haven't spoken to me in 3 years except for obligatory holiday calls. Because you refused every attempt at reconciliation. I refuse to apologise for living my life. Riley wipes her eyes, smearing her mascara. We missed you. We wanted you back in the family. On your terms. On reasonable terms. Reasonable to who? Maurice stops pacing and turns to face me. You know what? Fine. You got us. You're rich. We're idiots. Congratulations. But what did this accomplish? You think money validates you now? I think money gives me choices. Like what? Cutting us out of your life permanently? Like not needing your approval anymore? The words hang in the air like smoke from a fire that's already burned everything down. Brian laughs, but there's no humour in it. So that's it? You win, we lose, game over? There was never a game, Brian. There was just a family that couldn't accept who I was. And now? Mum asks. What happens now? I walk back to the table and start collecting the scattered property documents. Now you know the truth. What you do with it is up to you. Riley stands up abruptly, her chair toppling backward. This is insane. You're insane. You want to destroy the family over what? Pride? I want to stop pretending we're something we're not. Which is what? Close. The word lands like a physical blow. Riley staggers backward, Maurice catching her arm. Dad's voice drops to the tone he used for final judgments. If that's how you feel, then perhaps it's best if we leave. Perhaps it is. One by one they gather their coats from the closet, the same closet where I hung their jackets with such careful hope just hours ago. At the door, Riley turns back. You know what the saddest part is? We actually were proud of you tonight, before all this. We thought you'd finally found your way. I did find my way. You just don't like the path I chose. The door closes behind them with a soft click, leaving me alone in my $4 million house with the remnants of a dinner that cost more than most people's cars. From upstairs, I hear Jennifer's footsteps on the hardwood floor. Well, she calls down, that went better than expected. Jennifer appears at the top of the stairs, still in her pyjamas and fuzzy slippers. Should I come down or are you coming up? Down. I need wine. She pads down the steps, surveying the disaster zone that used to be my dining room. Crumpled papers scattered across the table, wine stains on the tablecloth, chairs pushed back at odd angles. Looks like Thanksgiving went well. I pour 2 glasses of the Bordeaux, my hands steadier than they should be. They know? All of it? Property values, purchase dates, the works. Caden's documentation was very thorough. Jennifer picks up one of the discarded envelopes, smoothing out the wrinkles. How'd they take it? About as well as you'd expect. Lots of shouting, some crying. Maurice called me vindictive. Maurice can eat shit. Riley said I was insane. Riley's engaged to Maurice, so her judgment is already questionable. I sink into the couch, suddenly exhausted. Maybe they're right. Maybe this was cruel. Cruel? Jennifer sits beside me, tucking her legs under her. They spent 2 hours talking down to you in your own house, at your own table, eating food you paid for. They didn't know it was my house. That's exactly the point. They treated you like garbage when they thought you were poor. That tells you everything you need to know. My phone buzzes on the coffee table. A text from Brian. That was fucked up, Nat, but also kind of brilliant. Call me when you're ready to talk. Another buzz. Riley. I can't believe you did this to us. We trusted you. Another. Dad, your mother is very upset. I hope you're satisfied. Popular girl tonight, Jennifer observes, reading over my shoulder. They hate me. They're embarrassed. There's a difference. The front door rattles with aggressive knocking. Jennifer and I exchange glances. Round 2, she asks. I peek through the window. Riley stands on the front steps, alone, mascara streaked down her cheeks. Just Riley. I open the door. She pushes past me without invitation, her heels clicking against the hardwood. We need to talk. I thought we covered everything at dinner. We covered your little revenge fantasy. We didn't cover the part where you completely humiliated me in front of my fiancé. Jennifer stands up from the couch. I should go upstairs. No, stay, Riley snaps. You're part of this too, aren't you? The mysterious roommate who's never around, but somehow pays for everything. Riley, meet Jennifer. Jennifer, Riley. Jennifer waves awkwardly. Hi, I've heard so much about you." "I bet you have. Did you two have fun planning this whole charade, laughing at how stupid we all were?" "Nobody was laughing," I say. "Bullshit." Riley's voice cracks. "This whole thing was designed to make us look like idiots. The fake roommate story, the fancy dinner, those fucking envelopes. It was all theatre." "You want to talk about theatre? Let's talk about your perfect engagement to Maurice." Riley goes very still. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means I know about the other women." The colour drains from her face. "What other women?" "The Instagram model in Miami, the marketing executive from his office. Should I keep going?" Jennifer's eyes widen. She grabs her wine and settles back into the couch like she's watching a movie. "You're lying." "I hired a private investigator 3 months ago. Want to see the photos?" Riley sinks into the nearest chair. "Why would you do that?" "Because something felt off about him. The way he talked about money, about investments. The way he avoided direct questions about his company." "You had no right." "I had every right to protect my sister from a con artist." "Con artist?" I pull out my phone and scroll to a folder labelled Maurice. "His company isn't going public. It's hemorrhaging money. The investors he bragged about, they pulled out last month. He's been using credit cards to fund his lifestyle." Riley stares at the phone screen, her face crumbling. No, that's not." "He wouldn't—" "The engagement ring is cubic zirconia. I had it appraised." She looks down at her hand, at the ring she's been showing off for months. "How do you know that?" "Because I know jewellery, and because I care about you, even when you're being awful to me." The fight goes out of her completely. She doubles over, sobbing into her hands. Oh God, I'm such an idiot." Jennifer reaches for the tissue box, sliding it across the coffee table. Men are trash. "Present company excluded," she adds, glancing at me. "I defended him," Riley chokes out between sobs. "When you were revealing all your success, he kept making snide comments and I defended him. I chose him over you." "You didn't know." "I should have known. The signs were there. The expensive dinners he couldn't really afford. The way he always had excuses when I asked about meeting his business partners." She looks up at me, mascara streaking her cheeks. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" "Would you have believed me?" "No," she admits. "I would have thought you were jealous." "I was jealous, just not of Maurice." "Of what?" "Of the fact that Mum and Dad were so excited about your engagement, so proud. They never looked at me like that." Riley wipes her nose with a tissue. "They were proud of you tonight, before the envelopes." "Mum kept talking about how elegant everything was, how grown up you seemed." "Grown up because I was finally living up to their standards." "Maybe, but also because you seemed happy, settled, like you'd found your place." "I did find my place. It just wasn't the place they wanted for me." Riley stands up unsteadily. "I need to go home. I need to think." "Are you going to confront Maurice?" "I don't know. Maybe. Probably." She pauses at the door. "For what it's worth, I'm sorry." "About tonight, about the way we treated you, about everything." "I'm sorry too." "For what?" "For letting it go on so long, for not trusting you enough to tell you the truth." She nods and walks out into the night, leaving me and Jennifer alone with the wreckage of Thanksgiving dinner. "Well," Jennifer says, refilling our wine glasses, "that was intense." "Think she'll be okay?" "She's stronger than she looks, and now she knows the truth about both of you." My phone buzzes again. This time it's Maurice. "You think money validates you now? Wait till karma hits." I show Jennifer the text. She snorts. Karma already hit. He just didn't notice who got struck. 3 weeks later, the brownstone hums with activity. Workers install track lighting in what used to be the living room, while Jennifer directs the placement of easels near the tall windows. "The Rothko reproduction goes on the far wall," I call out, unwrapping a canvas. "Natural light will wash it out anywhere else." "Since when do you know about lighting?" Jennifer asks, stepping over a coil of electrical wire. Since I spent 2 weeks researching gallery design, YouTube University strikes again. The front door chimes. I look up to see a woman in her 50s examining the space with professional interest. Ms. Natasha, I'm Patricia from Brooklyn Arts Weekly. We spoke about the preview. Right on time. I wipe my hands on my jeans and shake hers. Welcome to what will hopefully be the neighbourhood's newest contemporary art space. Patricia pulls out a tablet and starts taking notes. This is quite an ambitious project, converting a residential property into a commercial gallery. What inspired the decision? Sometimes you have to create the space you wish existed. And you're featuring your own work exclusively? For the opening exhibition, yes, but I plan to showcase other emerging digital artists as well. There's incredible talent being overlooked by traditional galleries. She nods, snapping photos of the installation process. I understand you made your fortune in cryptocurrency and NFTs. That's quite a transition from struggling artist to gallery owner. Not really, I'm still the same artist. I just have better resources now. The door chimes again. Brian walks in, looking around with obvious amazement. Holy shit, Nat. You actually did it. Language, I say automatically, then catch myself. Sorry, Mum's voice. He laughs. Fair enough, but seriously, this place looks incredible, very professional. Patricia looks up from her tablet. Are you family? Brother, Brian. He extends his hand. I'm here for moral support and manual labour. He's being modest, I tell Patricia. Brian's been helping with the installation all week. After work and weekends, he clarifies. My day job doesn't pay gallery owner money. Patricia scribbles more notes. How has your family reacted to this venture? Brian and I exchange glances. Mixed reviews, I say diplomatically. That's one way to put it, Brian mutters. After Patricia leaves with promises of a feature article, Brian helps me hang the last few pieces. The afternoon light streams through the windows, illuminating canvases that chronicle my journey from anger to acceptance. This one's new, he says, studying a painting of fractured mirrors reflecting different versions of the same face. I painted it last week. It's called Family Portrait. Subtle. I was never good at subtle. The door chimes again. We both turn, expecting another reporter or contractor. Instead, Riley stands in the doorway, looking smaller than I remember. Hi, she says quietly. Hi. She's alone, I notice. No engagement ring either. Jennifer told me about the gallery opening. I hope it's okay that I came. Of course it's okay. She walks slowly through the space, taking in each painting. Her eyes linger on a dark piece near the back, swirls of black and red that I painted during my angriest nights. These are powerful, she says finally. They're honest. Same thing, maybe. Brian clears his throat. I'm going to grab coffee. Anyone want anything? I'm good, Riley and I say simultaneously, then share a small smile. After he leaves, Riley stops in front of a canvas covered in layers of gold leaf over deep blues. This one's beautiful. What's it called? After the Storm. It feels hopeful. It is. She turns to face me. I left Maurice. I heard. Are you okay? Getting there. You were right about everything. The ring, the company, the other women. All of it. I'm sorry. Don't be. I needed to know. She pauses, studying the painting again. I've been thinking about what you said. About us never really being close. Riley. No, let me finish. You were right. We weren't close, but I want to be, if you'll let me. I feel something tight in my chest start to loosen. It won't be easy. There's a lot of history. I know, but maybe we can start over, or at least start somewhere new. She walks to another painting, this one brighter, with streaks of yellow breaking through storm clouds. I'd like to buy this one. You don't have to do that. I'm not doing it to be nice. I genuinely love it. How much? I name a price that's fair, but not family discounted. She nods and pulls out her phone. Venmo okay? You're serious about this? Dead serious. I want to support what you're building here. The payment notification pings on my phone. Riley walks to the window, looking out at the street where a small crowd has gathered to peer through the glass. People are curious about the gallery. Good. Curiosity brings foot traffic. And foot traffic brings sales. Hopefully. She turns back to me. For what it's worth, I think Mum and Dad are proud of you. They're just too stubborn to admit they were wrong. Are they? Dad's been researching cryptocurrency for weeks. He keeps muttering about digital assets and market volatility. Mum bought a book about contemporary art. Really? Really? They're trying to understand what they missed. The door chimes again. A young couple enters, drawn by the window display. They move through the space with genuine interest, stopping to read the artist statements beside each piece. "Excuse me," the woman calls out. "Are these for sale?" "They are," I reply, walking over to them. "This one is stunning," she says, pointing to a canvas covered in metallic threads woven through paint. "What's the price?" I quote the figure. She doesn't flinch. "We'll take it." Riley watches from across the room as I process my first official sale. When the couple leaves with their new artwork, she's smiling. "How does it feel?" she asks. "Like validation." The money? No. The fact that someone connected with something I created, that's worth more than any cryptocurrency gain. She nods, understanding. "I should go. Let you get back to work." "Riley?" She pauses at the door. "Thank you for coming, for the painting, for trying. Thank you for giving me the chance." After she leaves, I stand alone in my gallery, surrounded by pieces of my soul made visible. The late afternoon light catches the gold leaf in After the Storm, making it shimmer like hope itself. My phone buzzes. A text from an unknown number. "Saw the article online. Congratulations on the gallery. Some debts aren't financial. Yours will take time. Dad." I stare at the message for a long moment, then delete it without responding. Some conversations aren't ready to happen yet, but maybe, someday, they will be. The gallery buzzes with opening night energy. Wine glasses clink, heels tap against hardwood floors, and conversations flow around my paintings like water around stones. I watch from behind the reception desk as strangers examine pieces of my soul hung on walls. "Natasha, the Times critic just bought 2 pieces," Jennifer whispers, appearing at my elbow with champagne. "And that collector from Manhattan wants to discuss a commission." "Which pieces did the critic buy?" "Family Portrait and After the Storm." I almost laugh. Of course those 2. The front door opens, bringing a gust of December air and 3 familiar figures. My parents stand in the doorway, overdressed and uncomfortable, while Brian bounces on his toes behind them. "They insisted on coming," he says, appearing at my side. "I may have mentioned the Times review." Mum approaches first, her eyes scanning the crowd with the calculating gaze she usually reserves for social events. "This is quite impressive, Natasha. Very professional." "Thank you." Dad examines the price list posted near the entrance, his eyebrows climbing toward his hairline. "These prices seem substantial." "Art is an investment," I reply, echoing words he used to dismiss my work. He has the grace to look sheepish. Riley appears from the back room where she's been helping manage sales. "The red dots are multiplying," she announces, 7 pieces sold in the first hour. "Red dots?" Mum asks. "Sold stickers," Riley explains. "Gallery tradition." A woman in an elegant black dress approaches our group. "Excuse me, are you the artist?" "I am." "Your work is extraordinary, so raw and honest. I'm particularly drawn to this piece." She gestures toward a canvas dominated by dark blues and silver streaks. "The emotion is palpable." "That one's called isolation." perfect title, the way you've captured loneliness while still suggesting hope. It speaks to me. Is it available? I glance at the price tag. It's one of my higher-priced pieces. It is. Wonderful, I'll take it. As she walks away to complete the purchase, Dad clears his throat. That painting sold for more than I made in my first year as a lawyer. Different times, I say simply. Mum picks up one of the gallery brochures, reading my artist statement. You write about transformation here, about finding your voice through adversity. That's what happened? We were the adversity. It's not a question. I meet her eyes, seeing something I haven't seen in years, vulnerability. Some of it, yes. She nods slowly. I read about cryptocurrency, about digital art markets. I didn't understand what you were building. You didn't try to understand. No. We didn't. The admission hangs between us like a bridge neither of us is sure how to cross. A young man with a press badge interrupts. Ms. Natasha, I'm from Art News. Could I get a quick interview about your transition from digital to physical gallery space? Of course. The interview lasts 20 minutes. Questions about my investment strategy, my artistic vision, my plans for the gallery's future. Professional questions that treat me like the business owner I've become. When it ends, my family is still there, clustered around Riley near the wine table. That was impressive, Dad says as I rejoin them. You handled those questions like a seasoned entrepreneur. I am a seasoned entrepreneur. Yes, you are. The simple acknowledgement carries more weight than any apology. Brian raises his glass. To my sister, who turned finger paints into a financial empire. To Natasha, Riley adds, who proved that success looks different for everyone. Mum and Dad raise their glasses silently. It's not forgiveness, but it's recognition. Sometimes that's enough. As the evening winds down, I find myself standing on the second-floor balcony, looking down at the gallery below. The space glows with warm light, my paintings creating a narrative of pain transformed into purpose. Riley joins me, wrapping her coat tighter against the cold. How does it feel? She asks. Like I finally have a room of my own. Virginia Woolf reference, very literary for an artist. I contain multitudes, she laughs. That you do. Below us, the last visitors examine the remaining pieces. A red dot appears on another canvas. Breaking Point, a piece I painted during my darkest days after Dad cut me off. Do you regret it? Riley asks. The Thanksgiving dinner, the reveal, all of it? I consider the question, watching a couple debate whether to purchase one of my smaller pieces. No, I needed them to see me clearly, all of me. And now they do? Now they're trying to. That's more than I had before. My phone buzzes with a text from an unknown number. Saw the gallery coverage online. Proud of what you've built. Would like to visit sometime if you're open to it. Walker. I show Riley the message. She smiles. Dad using your first name instead of Natasha is progress. Baby steps. The best kind. The gallery empties slowly, leaving behind the detritus of success. Empty wine bottles, crumpled napkins, and a wall full of red dots marking sold pieces. Jennifer counts the evening's receipts while I lock the front door. 32,000 in sales, she announces. Not bad for opening night. Not bad at all. I walk through the quiet gallery, past paintings that chronicle my journey from rejection to recognition. Each piece tells part of the story. The anger, the isolation, the determination, the triumph. At the back of the gallery, After the Storm glows under its spotlight. The gold leaf catches the overhead lighting, creating the illusion of sunrise breaking through darkness. When they laughed at me over pumpkin pie, I smiled, for the same reason I'm smiling now, because revenge tastes best when you serve it in their favourite dining room. But tonight, standing in my gallery surrounded by the evidence of my success, I realise something else. The sweetest revenge isn't proving them wrong. It's proving yourself right.
I was 34 when my mother sued me in federal court. Fraud. That was the word they used, sharp, cold, and deliberate. According to the suit I had fabricated, my military record manipulated an aging grandfather into handing me his research facility, and this one still stings, crafted a persona to deceive the public and acquire unearned government grants. They made it sound poetic, like I was some villain in a movie. But I wasn't acting, I was Rowan Maddox, former communications officer, 17th Sustainment Brigade, now director of a rural science initiative, named after the only person who ever believed in me, my grandfather, Dr. Emery Maddox. The day of the hearing, the courtroom felt colder than the December wind outside. My sister Vanessa sat 2 rows ahead of me, her hair perfectly set spine, stiff with self-righteousness. My mother wore the same silk scarf she used to wear to charity galas. She didn't look at me once. I didn't come with family, I came with records, a sealed envelope from the Department of Defense, and one name on my witness list, Major General Whit Corley. They hadn't seen that part coming. So when the clerk called the case and the judge lifted his eyes over the bench, I exhaled once. Not from fear, but because I knew this was it. They wanted to erase me. But I wasn't walking into this courtroom alone, and they were about to find out exactly who had my back. I was never the daughter they introduced at dinners. Vanessa was the polished one, the legacy. She danced at cotillions and turned for a senator and landed herself a fiancé whose family had a vineyard and a private jet. I built radios out of scrap parts and memorized soil pH charts for fun. By high school, I was already invisible in my own house, except when someone needed to be corrected. My mother used to say it softly, like it was meant as kindness. Rowan, try not to overcomplicate things. Not everyone is interested in what you're interested in. Then she'd steer the conversation back to Vanessa's piano recital or whatever new diet she was testing. I enlisted at 19, not out of defiance, not really. More like necessity. I needed distance, and a way to fund college that didn't come with strings attached to the family foundation. Basic training was the first time someone called me capable, without sounding surprised. They assigned me to a signal support unit in Germany, where I worked 12-hour shifts, troubleshooting battlefield communications and satellite uplinks. By the time I was 24, I'd led deployment teams in South Sudan, northern Pakistan, and one dust-bitten hellhole near the Uzbek border that still lives behind my eyelids. That one changed everything. I came back from that mission with 2 ruptured discs, 31 stitches, and a reassignment order stateside only. Non-combat, which meant teaching and testing, a career stall out in most people's eyes, but not mine, because what they gave me was a lab, a chance to rebuild what war broke down. That's when my grandfather started calling again. Dr. Emery Maddox had taught soil science and regenerative crop systems at the University of Georgia for 40 years. He was the only one in the family who didn't wince when I talked about environmental telemetry or root cell mimicry. He used to joke that we were both too curious for polite company. When I visited him on leave, he showed me a half-finished project, an annex on a rural plot outside Augusta. A research site, he called it, meant to train veterans in agricultural resilience using military principles for soil recovery. It wasn't much bare beams, cracked floor, outdated equipment, but he spoke about it like it was the moon landing. "You'll take this over one day," he told me, handing me a blueprint. I laughed. They'd riot. He didn't smile back. They don't get a vote. I never got to see him again. 3 months later, while I was recovering from spinal surgery, he died. They didn't tell me. No phone call, no message. I found out through an alumni bulletin email that arrived 2 weeks late. When I drove to the family house, the gate was locked. Vanessa said through the speaker that the funeral had already happened. It was just family, she added, with no irony at all. I stood outside that gate for a long time. Then I drove 4 hours to the annex alone. The weeds had already started creeping through the walls. The lab bench was covered in dust, but a coffee mug still sat near the sink, one of those world's best grandpa types chipped at the rim. There was no plaque, no staff, no funding, just silence and the memory of a promise. It took me 2 years, but I rebuilt that annex. I filed paperwork, applied for nonprofit status, pitched grants to skeptical donors, and begged 3 universities to let their students intern with me for free. Eventually, we launched a pilot program for veterans interested in sustainable agriculture. And then when we finally got USDA certification, something changed. News articles started circulating, government agencies reached out, and with the publicity came attention I didn't ask for, including one afternoon, a formal letter from my family's legal counsel, a cease and desist. They were claiming the annex had been transferred under coercive influence, that I had misrepresented my relationship with my grandfather and misled the public by implying military credentials that could not be verified. My hands trembled as I read it. Not from fear, from recognition. This wasn't about money, it was about erasure. Again. But this time, they weren't locking the gate behind me. This time, I had something they didn't. Proof. The annex didn't look like much from the outside. A long, low structure built from reclaimed timber and corrugated steel with a hand-painted sign that read, Maddox Agricultural Initiative, nailed crooked above the door. Most days, the lights flickered. The plumbing needed prayer more than pressure, but inside it pulsed with something rare purpose. We weren't running experiments to impress journals. We were building field kits for farmers in drought-stricken counties, designing seed vaults that could withstand fire, teaching veterans how to test their own soil, manage their own water cycles, build something stable with their own hands. It worked. By year 2, we'd partnered with 3 counties, trained 60 former service members, and launched a small-scale pilot farm using regenerative irrigation systems. The USDA sent a field agent, then a camera crew. Someone from the governor's office visited briefly in polished shoes that sank into the red Georgia mud. We smiled for the photo anyway. Then came the grant, $4.2 million in federal funding. Not for me, for the mission, for the team, for the kids in our STEM outreach who used to think science was something only rich schools got to do. We cried when it was announced. One of my junior staffers carved a plaque from old barnwood. We hung it crooked next to my grandfather's photo, and 3 weeks later, my mother sued me. I read the email 3 times before I believed it. The subject line was clinical pending litigation, Maddox estate. The sender was her attorney. The content blunt. They accused me of fraud. Not just over the annex, but over everything: my military record, my relationship to my grandfather, the very story I'd shared in every funding meeting and press briefing. According to them, I'd manipulated an elderly man into altering his will while he was mentally compromised. And I'd exaggerated or falsified my service to gain public sympathy and financial leverage. The sting wasn't in the accusation, it was in the timing. They hadn't said a word when I was struggling to keep the lights on, when I was sleeping in the back office with a space heater and a mouse trap. But now, when it had become something real, when I had become someone real, they wanted to rewrite the narrative. Vanessa went on record first. She gave a statement to a local paper full of subtle knives, hidden in graceful syntax. I love my sister, she said, but there are discrepancies in her story that deserve legal clarity. My grandfather was a brilliant man, but toward the end, his judgment wasn't what it once was. We all want the truth, that's all. They filed the suit in federal court in Atlanta. I received the official complaint by courier, hand-delivered by a man in a pressed blue uniform who looked genuinely sorry when he said, Ms. Maddox, I'm just the messenger. I didn't cry. Instead, I walked out behind the annex to the wooden bench overlooking our test fields. I sat there until sunset, hands numb in my lap, watching the wind move through the rye, like it knew something I didn't. I thought about burning everything down, just leaving, letting them win, again. But I didn't. I made one call. Sir, I said, when the voice answered low and steady and familiar, I think I need you to testify. There was a long pause on the other end. Then, about time, someone asked. The courthouse in Atlanta felt more like a cathedral than a place for law. High ceilings, polished marble echoes that made every shoe click sound like a gunshot. They'd chosen federal court for the optics: grander, more public, more damning if I lost. I wore a navy suit, no jewelry, no makeup. Nothing to soften, nothing to distract. Just clarity. My lawyer, Evan, was sharp and quiet, a former JAG, with the calm of a man who'd once negotiated hostage terms in Kandahar. He didn't promise me victory, just preparedness. The courtroom filled quickly. Journalists whispered as they passed, flipping through printed summaries of the case. A few students from our annex program showed up and sat in the back, silent but present. That mattered more than they could know. My mother entered like she was stepping into a luncheon. Head high, smile tight. She wore black not out of mourning, but theater. Vanessa followed behind, lips pursed, hair pulled into a tight bun. She avoided my eyes. Opening statements were routine. The opposing counsel painted me as an opportunist, emotionally unstable, romantically idealistic about military life, desperate for legacy. They presented old social media posts, photos in uniform excerpts, from press releases, snippets from grant proposals. She built a myth, the attorney said smoothly, wrapped herself in borrowed valor, and used a grieving man's affection to stage a redemption arc. They called Vanessa first. She walked to the stand in heels that echoed like accusations. Under oath, she described my absence from family events, my strained relationship with our grandfather, how he'd grown confused near the end. She referenced an alleged journal entry. He wrote that Rowan stopped returning calls, that she had changed. Evan didn't flinch. When it was his turn, he simply asked, "Did your grandfather ever serve in the military?" "No," Vanessa said, almost confused. "Did you?" She stiffened. "No." "And Rowan," she hesitated. "She says she did." "No." I asked if she served. Not what she said. Vanessa faltered. I don't know. They called my mother next." She cried on cue, a handkerchief dabbing dry eyes. "She was always distant," she whispered. "So headstrong. She never tried to belong." They showed a letter, supposedly written by my grandfather's legal advisor, raising concerns about his capacity during the last revision of the will. I noticed the date. It was 2 months before he died. I also noticed the handwriting on the envelope. It was my mother's. We took the afternoon recess. I sat alone in the hallway, hands clasped tight, the sealed envelope from the Department of Defense still untouched in my briefcase. Evan returned with a single nod. "He's here." I stood when the doors opened. Not because I was told to, but because I saw him, Major General Whit Corley, in full uniform, silver clusters, at his collar ribbons like history stitched to his chest. He walked without apology, flanked by 2 junior officers, who said nothing but carried everything. The courtroom stilled. He took the oath with a hand steady as marble. The judge looked surprised. Opposing counsel looked ill. "State your name and rank for the record." "Major General Whitaker, Corley, U.S. Army, retired." "Do you recognize the defendant?" "Yes, sir." "Captain Rowan Maddox, formerly of 17th Sustainment Brigade, Signal Corps. Served under my command in both overseas and domestic operations." He listed dates, missions, commendations, brought hard copies of deployment logs, photos of our comms unit in the aerial zone, me, in the center, mud up to my shins, laughing with a radio balanced on my knees. A handwritten evaluation, with his signature at the bottom, demonstrates leadership beyond rank, resourceful under fire. Opposing counsel tried to rattle him. "General, you're aware that Ms. Maddox has claimed significant responsibility in operations your department officially labeled minor support efforts." Corley raised an eyebrow. "You ever spend 3 days building a radio tower with zip ties and a half-charged solar cell while insurgents shelled the perimeter?" "She did." "Saved 42 people and a field hospital." "You want to call that minor, you go ahead." The room shifted. The lies buckled. Evan approached with one final question. "General Corley, in your professional opinion, did Captain Maddox misrepresent her service record?" "No," Corley said without hesitation. "If anything, she underplayed it." And then, softer. "We owe her more than we ever gave." The judge called for order, but it was already done. The gallery was silent breath, held like communion. As Corley stepped down, he glanced at me once. No salute, just a slight incline of his head, respect unspoken. I didn't smile. I didn't cry. I just breathed. They hadn't just failed to destroy me. They had summoned the very man who trained me to endure it all. The verdict didn't take long. The judge called us back in after lunch. No deliberation from a jury. This was a bench trial. He adjusted his glasses, looked over the rim, like he'd seen too many families tear themselves apart for less. I find no basis for the claim of fraud, he said flatly. The military records are valid. The estate transfer legal. The accusations malicious in tone and lacking in evidence. Then he paused, glanced toward my mother and sister. Further, this court recognizes the emotional and reputational harm caused by this filing. The defendant's name, both personally and professionally, was dragged through the mud on the strength of suspicion and resentment. He didn't say, "Shame on you," but he didn't need to. He awarded me damages enough to cover legal fees and then some, but I barely heard the number. My ears were ringing, my breath stuck halfway to a sob I refused to let out. Not here. Not now. As we stood to leave, Vanessa moved first. Her heels clacked a little too fast, like she was trying to outrun the silence. My mother followed, lips pressed tight, hands shaking in a way that made her look suddenly older. She paused at the aisle, turned back. "This wasn't about you," she said low and trembling. I met her eyes. "That's the problem." She flinched. I walked out without looking back. Outside, the air was warmer than it should have been. Spring was early this year. The press waited, of course, but Evan moved between us like a wall, and I kept walking. One of the reporters shouted something about a public statement. I didn't answer. My name had already been spoken under oath. That was enough. Back at the annex, I didn't go inside right away. I sat on the bench my grandfather built, facing the test fields, just dirt now waiting for seed. The wind moved across the rye stubble, bending it like prayer. I thought about what it had cost. 2 years of silence from my own family, a public record full of accusations. The nights I woke up shaking, convinced they'd win, not because they were right, but because they were louder, richer, familiar to the systems that listen. But they didn't. Not this time. Inside, one of our interns had left the lights on. I walked into the lab, past the centrifuges and data tablets, and half-finished experiments. On my desk sat the envelope I'd carried through the entire trial, the one General Corley handed me, before leaving. I opened it. Inside was a single photo, grainy, printed from an old film roll. Me at 21, kneeling in the sand with a headset too big for my face, grinning like I hadn't learned yet how much the world could take from you. On the back in his handwriting, she didn't flinch. I held it for a long time. They tried to erase me. Instead, they carved my name into record under oath, under scrutiny, under truth. And truth it costs. It bruises. It breaks what never should have held. But it also builds. And mine was just beginning. The grant money arrived quietly, almost like it didn't want to make a fuss. A plain envelope. No cover letter, no logo. Just a check from a private agricultural foundation signed by a trustee, whose name I'd only seen once before in a footnote on a military research paper. The memo line read, "For the ones who stayed in the storm." Attached was a short note, handwritten in dark blue ink. "We saw what you did. We believe in what comes next." That spring, we broke ground on the west acreage, 4 acres of red Georgia dirt that used to grow nothing but stubborn weeds and bad memories. We planted heirloom sorghum and started the annex first full crop rotation trial. A greenhouse went up. So did a seed-saving library, a new water reclamation system, and a digital soil mapping station. People started calling it a campus. I didn't fight the term. We expanded our veterans program to 3 states. I still taught the morning soil lab's hands in the dirt, watching grown men and women bend over sample trays like they were looking for something lost. Maybe they were. Every Thursday, we hosted a science workshop for local middle schoolers. They arrived in oversized jackets, carrying more silence than questions. I knew the look, kids who'd learned to shrink their curiosity to wait for permission they didn't know how to ask for. But they were sharp, observant, stubborn like good scientists should be. One girl, Ellie, stayed behind after class one day. She pulled a crumpled Ziploc bag from her coat pocket, filled with rust-colored soil, and a sketchbook full of hand-drawn charts. "I think the Earth's sick," she whispered. "But I don't know how to prove it." I handed her a junior field kit and said, "Then let's test the pulse." We didn't publicize the verdict. No press conference, no statement. It wasn't about vindication. It was about still being here. About proving day after day that truth doesn't vanish just because someone questions it loudly enough. But word spread anyway. People showed up not all at once, but slowly. A retired colonel from South Carolina. A woman who'd grown up with my grandfather and brought clippings of his old journal columns. A former USDA field agent who offered to mentor 2 of our interns. And once, unexpectedly, Vanessa. She didn't announce it. Just drove up in a rented sedan, parked near the compost bins, and stood with her hands in her coat pockets, watching the wind ripple through the ryegrass. I walked over. She didn't look at me at first. Just said, "I read your soil report in the state journal. I didn't know you subscribed." "I don't," she replied. "I searched your name." She paused. "I thought if I admitted you were right, it would mean I'd failed. But it doesn't. You earned every piece of this." It wasn't an apology, but it wasn't nothing. I didn't ask her to stay, but she did. Walked the grounds, visited the greenhouse, talked to 2 of our students. At the end of the day, she slipped a folded printout into my hand, an outreach guide she'd written on helping shy teens speak more confidently in public. "I thought maybe the kids could use it," she said, "so they don't have to wait until they're 30 to feel heard." We've never talked about the lawsuit, or the silence before it. But since then, she's volunteered twice a year, helping with student presentations and peer coaching. The kids call her Coach V. Sometimes I even forget she once tried to strip my name out of every record tied to our family. My mother never wrote. I don't expect her to. Some stories don't get epilogues, just endings. These days, I wake up before dawn, pour a mug of black coffee, and walk the annex grounds before the others arrive. The air smells like compost plastic mulch and wet pollen. The light over the fields is softest just before 6. In my office, beside a photo of me, at 21, mud-streaked and smiling beside a radio tower, I keep a small plaque on the wall. Truth lives here. We don't silence the past. We use it. We press it into the earth, turn it with patience and labor, until something better takes root. Because when the ground remembers who walked it honestly, it grows differently. And so do we. My name is Avery Winslow. I wasn't on the guest list. They said I had no reason to be there, no title, no degree, to celebrate, no place in the family photo. So I sat in the last row of folding chairs at the edge of UCLA's stadium, hands folded in my lap, surrounded by strangers clapping for someone else's milestone. The woman they were clapping for was Vanessa, my sister, the valedictorian. Her name rang out through the speakers. My mother stood. My father wiped away a theatrical tear. Even the uncles and cousins I hadn't seen in a decade leaned forward, beaming like they were watching royalty rise. Me, I didn't move. Then my mother saw me. She didn't wave. She didn't smile. She tilted her head toward her husband, and loud enough for half the section to hear, said she just came for the free snacks. People laughed. I didn't. 7 minutes later, the sky broke open. The sound hit first, a deep, rhythmic thunder that silenced even the MC mid-sentence. Heads turned. The wind changed. And then came the silhouette, an MH-60S Navy Seahawk, lowering into the open grass behind the stage. As it touched down, a uniformed officer stepped out and marched straight toward me. He stopped, saluted, and said clearly, so the whole field could hear Rear Admiral Winslow, "Ma'am, we're ready for you." And just like that, no one remembered Vanessa's speech. I wasn't the kind of daughter who fit well in photographs. Vanessa was. She had the perfect smile, the practiced posture, the gold honor cords that caught the light just right. When we were younger, our mother would brush her hair until it shined, buy her dresses with matching bows, and say things like, "You're going to be somebody." To me, she said, "Try not to ruin the picture." I didn't sparkle like Vanessa. I liked silence machines and questions that didn't have easy answers. I once spent 3 weeks dismantling a toaster just to understand how the coils worked. My father threw it out and grounded me for breaking things that work fine. No one asked what I had learned. By the time I turned 17, I had stopped trying to be seen. I applied for the Navy ROTC scholarship without telling anyone. I signed the papers in a school hallway with the guidance counselor as my witness. I left home the day after graduation with a duffel bag, no goodbye hug, and a note from my mother that read, "Please don't make this harder for your sister." I didn't, and still she never looked back. Boot camp wasn't easy, but it made sense. Orders, structure, purpose. I rose through the ranks not because I was loud, but because I listened. I kept things running when others panicked. My CO once called me quiet steel. I took that as a compliment. Over time, I built a career in logistics command. I deployed twice to the Gulf. I coordinated humanitarian supply drops in flood zones no one could pronounce. I saw things that changed how I walked, how I slept, how I breathed. No one in my family asked where I was. I stopped volunteering it. Birthdays passed without calls. Holidays came and went. I wired money home when Vanessa got into college just in case they needed help. No one ever said thank you. I didn't expect them to. That's not how my family operated. We were a currency of appearances, not affection. The last time I saw them before the graduation was 5 years ago at a funeral for an aunt I barely knew. Vanessa gave a eulogy. My mother clutched pearls. My father shook hands like a man running for office. I showed up in uniform. No one commented on the ribbons. Afterward, I stood outside by the car, unsure whether to wait for them. Vanessa passed me without slowing down. She didn't even recognize me at first. Then she stopped, turned, and said, "Oh, I didn't know you'd be here. Not cold exactly, just indifferent." I told myself I was fine with that. I had work. I had my own team. I had a calling bigger than childhood wounds. But the thing about wounds is they don't disappear. They wait. Sometimes it takes something sharp to wake them again. A phrase, a glance, a careless sentence in front of strangers. Or a graduation stage where the only person invisible is the one who doesn't belong in the frame. So when the invitation came, a formal request from a professor at UCLA to present a commendation medal to an outstanding female STEM graduate, I didn't connect the dots right away. Not until I saw the name. Vanessa Winslow, the outstanding female, the family favorite. And suddenly, the girl who dismantled toasters wasn't so invisible anymore. The envelope was thick cream-colored, with an embossed UCLA seal and gold lettering across the top. It looked expensive, something you frame, not open. At first, I thought it was a mistake. I hadn't set foot on that campus in over a decade, but the letter inside was direct-typed with military precision. We cordially invite Rear Admiral Avery Winslow to present the award for Distinguished Achievement in Applied Sciences at the UCLA Spring Commencement Ceremony. It was signed by Dr. Emily Hart, a name I hadn't heard since we were both cadets competing in robotics drills at Quantico. She was a professor now. I had seen her name in a Navy logistics journal just 2 months earlier. She must have seen mine too. I said yes. Not for Vanessa, not even for my family. I said yes because there was something sobering about standing in a place where people once expected nothing of you except silence. I didn't tell anyone I was coming. I didn't reach out. I booked a hotel 2 towns away and drove in that morning, wearing civilian clothes and a pair of sunglasses big enough to make me anonymous. The stadium was buzzing by the time I arrived. Students in robes clutched flowers and phones. Parents wore suits that didn't quite fit and clapped too hard for names they could barely pronounce. I moved through the crowd like vapor, neither hiding nor seeking. I found an open seat in the very back row near the emergency exit and a half-empty lemonade stand. No one looked twice. Then they called her name. Valedictorian of the class of Biomedical Sciences, Vanessa Winslow. The cheers were immediate and thunderous. I watched her step onto the stage, confident as ever. Her hair was perfect, curled like it had been done professionally. Her white stole shimmered beneath the sun. She waved to the crowd, then looked straight toward the VIP section, where our parents sat front and center. They stood as if rehearsed. My mother clutched her pearls, the same ones from the funeral. My father placed a hand over his heart. A cousin waved a giant poster with Vanessa's face printed on it like she was a senator or a pop star. My brow didn't move. No one knew her here, and I didn't mind. Until my mother spotted me. It didn't take her long. Her eyes scanned the crowd like a heat-seeking missile, pausing when they landed on mine. Her lips parted. I saw recognition, then discomfort, then something sharper. She leaned toward my father and whispered. Then she stood. She actually stood, in the middle of the ceremony, and loud enough to pierce the clapping and the polite commentary from the MC, she said she just came for the free snacks. A few people chuckled. Some turned to look. A few kept clapping, pretending not to hear. I didn't react, not with words. I crossed my legs, folded my arms, and stared straight ahead, like I was watching a cloud formation, not my family make a fool of itself. That was their performance, not mine. On stage, Vanessa hadn't noticed. She was too busy basking in applause, delivering a speech about resilience and support systems, quoting Maya Angelou like it meant something. The irony could have drowned me if I let it. Instead, I counted the minutes. 7 to be exact. Because that's when the sky changed. The first sound was distant, like a growl beneath the wind. Some thought it was a storm rolling in. But I knew that sound too well. Rotor blades, not just any aircraft. Seahawk, naval transport, mid-size, precise. I stood quietly and walked toward the edge of the crowd, not drawing attention, but no longer hiding either. That helicopter wasn't for the crowd. It wasn't for the university. It wasn't even for Vanessa. It was for me, and soon everyone would know why. The MH-60S Seahawk descended like a judgment. Controlled, deliberate, final. People squinted upward, shielding their eyes as wind blasted across the ceremony field. Vanessa paused mid-sentence on stage, her voice caught between 2 syllables. The MC fumbled the microphone. One of the faculty members dropped a clipboard. The crowd shifted attention, snapping toward the source of the noise. Cameras rose. Gasps rippled like a wave across the seated rows. My mother reached for my father's arm, her pearl bracelet jangling as she whispered something sharp and urgent. And I walked. Not quickly, not dramatically, just with purpose. Down the side aisle, past confused students and murmuring parents. My boots struck the concrete with measured cadence. I didn't wear my uniform in the stands, but I carried it in a garment bag pressed crisp, bearing every medal I had earned and none I had asked for. Near the edge of the field, I paused behind the stage and stepped into a temporary structure, one of those flimsy white tents used for catering or guest prep. Inside, a Navy lieutenant stood at attention. "Ma'am," he said without blinking, "your uniform is ready. 10 hut outside in 60 seconds. I nodded, unzipped the bag, and changed. Rank insignia, ribbons, polished shoes. The dark navy blue of formal dress uniform never used to mean anything to me. Not until I realized how much they had tried to convince me I didn't deserve it. Outside, the rotors were still spinning. Dust swirled. The helicopter had landed behind the stage on a grassy stretch cordoned off by orange cones. No one was supposed to be there. Now every eye was locked on it. As I stepped back into the sunlight, the lieutenant called out Rear Admiral on the field. The 10-member honor guard snapped into formation. The entire stadium froze. Even Vanessa. I didn't look at her, not yet. The commanding officer stepped forward from the front of the line. He stopped 3 feet from me, heels locked chin high, and saluted with precision honed by decades. "Rear Admiral Winslow," he said loud enough to echo against the concrete bleachers. "We are here as ordered, ma'am." My name, Winslow, landed like thunder. From the front row, my father stood slowly. My mother didn't. Vanessa's mouth hung open. One hand clutched her speech note cards. The other hovered near her chest, like she wasn't sure whether to cover her heart or throw up. I saluted back crisp and silent. Then I turned toward the stage. "Permission to approach the podium," I said to the MC, who looked like he might faint. He stepped aside, mumbling, "Why, yes, of course, Admiral." The microphone was still hot. The crowd was dead silent. I stood at the center of the stage, adjusted the mic, and spoke. "My name is Rear Admiral Avery Winslow. I serve in the United States Navy attached to Joint Command Logistics for Humanitarian Response. I let that settle. Then I turned toward the audience. Today, I was invited here to recognize the resilience and excellence of this university's graduating class. But it seems my presence was unexpected. A few chuckles rose, awkward, unsure. I continued. My family is in the crowd today. You may know them. You may have just heard one of them speak. Pause. I let the tension stretch. I wanted them to feel it. I wasn't on the guest list. I wasn't expected. But then again, some of us weren't raised to be seen. We were raised to survive. My voice didn't shake. It didn't need to. I'm here because a young woman, someone in this graduating class, was selected to receive the Navy's award for distinguished innovation in crisis response. She built a tracking algorithm for emergency relief delivery using only university datasets and public records. She solved something real, quietly, completely, without needing a stage. I pulled a silver box from my pocket. Inside was the medal. And I'm here to say, not all valor wears a smile. Then I turned to face Vanessa. She was still frozen one step behind the podium mascara, threatening to run. But I wasn't there for her. I extended the box toward the student standing behind her, the real honoree, a first-generation graduate from Riverside, whose name no one remembered until that moment. She took the medal with shaking hands. The applause that followed wasn't polite. It was seismic. After the applause, I stepped down from the stage and back into the shadow of the tent. My hands were steady, but I could feel my pulse in my teeth. The student I'd awarded stood off to the side, her medal still clutched against her chest, like it might disappear if she let go. Her parents sobbed quietly, arms wrapped around each other. I gave her a small nod. She nodded back, like we both understood something words would only ruin. I turned away, just in time to see Vanessa approaching. She was still in her cap and gown, but the light had drained from her face. Her walk wasn't her usual glide of practiced confidence. This was slower, like each step had to be negotiated with her own pride. She stopped a few feet in front of me. "You're a rear admiral." Her voice was almost too small to hear over the crowd noise. I didn't answer right away. "I was promoted last year," I said finally. "Joint Command Pacific Fleet, Logistics Oversight, Emergency Deployments." Vanessa blinked. "You never told anyone. No one asked." She flinched, not visibly, but something behind her eyes tightened. "I thought you just left," she said. "That you gave up. On us. On everything." "No," I said. "You made that easier by pretending I was never there." A pause stretched between us, taut and unfinished. She looked down at the grass. "You came to my graduation." "I came to honor a student," I said quietly. "Your graduation was incidental." That one landed. I didn't throw it with cruelty, but I didn't pat it either. The truth has edges for a reason. She took a breath, folded her arms, then dropped them again, like she didn't know what to do with her hands. "I didn't know," she muttered. "Didn't want to." She didn't argue that. From behind her, I saw movement, our parents approaching. My mother's expression was tight, her steps careful, but I knew that look. It was the one she wore at fundraisers and country club brunches. A mask of composed civility stretched over something hollow. "Avery," she said with a smile too wide. "That was quite a surprise. We had no idea you were coming." I turned to her, fully still in uniform. "I wasn't invited." "Well, had we known," she started, her voice rising with the hint of performative grace, "we would have arranged something. You could have sat with us. We're all family after all." "No," I said, voice flat. "We're not." My father stiffened. "Avery, that's not necessary, isn't it?" I asked, locking eyes with him. "You both told people I washed out. That I was somewhere overseas, doing odd work, avoiding the family." My mother's smile faltered. "I commanded supply chains that saved thousands after typhoons and earthquakes. I trained officers who now lead whole task forces. I've had my name in military strategy briefings on 3 continents, and not once did either of you ask if I was safe, or proud, or even alive." They stood there in silence, unable to move or retreat. Vanessa looked between us like she was watching a scene play out from someone else's life. I turned to go, but my mother reached out just enough to brush my sleeve. Wait! Can we take one photo, all of us? For the memory. I stared at her hand. Then at her. For the memory, I repeated. And I stepped back. No. I walked toward the helicopter where the crew stood at ease, watching but not intervening. I climbed in. The crew chief gave the signal. As the Seahawk lifted wind, whipped through the open field, scattering programs and paper cups across the grass. From the air, the crowd looked small. My family looked smaller. And for the first time in my life, they had no script left to read from. A week after the ceremony, a letter came in the mail. Not a text, not an email. A real envelope, thick and slightly smudged, addressed in handwriting I hadn't seen in years. It was from Vanessa. Inside was a single sheet of paper. No greeting, no signature. Just a few lines. I still have the paper ship you folded when I was 7. You left it on my windowsill the night before you left. I didn't understand why you stopped writing after that. Now I do. I'm sorry I never asked. I read it twice. Not because I didn't believe it, but because something in it felt like the apology I stopped expecting long ago. I didn't write back. Instead, I mailed her a box, nothing fancy. Just one old schematic I had drawn in officer school, a rescue vessel designed for rough waters. Inside, I included a single sentence. Some storms don't come to drown you. They come to see if you can build. I didn't expect a reply, but something shifted after that. A few weeks later, I got an email from Dr. Hart, the same professor who'd invited me to speak. The students are still talking about you, about the silence before the salute, about what it means to be needed even when you're unwelcome. She added a note at the bottom. There's a petition going around. They want to name a scholarship after you. I stared at those words for a while. Then I closed my laptop and went outside, letting the wind touch my face the way it used to on deck, back when I thought rank might fill what family didn't. I didn't feel powerful. I felt still. In that stillness, I remembered the girl I used to be, the one who took apart radios, folded ships out of notebook paper, and hoped someone would one day say, "Good job, kid." They never did. But someone else did. At a STEM outreach event a few months later, a middle schooler raised her hand and asked me, "Were you always this brave?" I thought about it for a second, then told her the truth. No, I just stopped apologizing for being ready. She grinned and wrote that down like it meant something. Maybe it did. Vanessa writes sometimes, short notes, occasional links to articles about education reform, a scanned copy of a guide she created, How to Speak Science Without Shrinking Yourself. She now volunteers twice a year with the Navy's Youth Engagement Program. Some of the cadets call her Coach V. She never said "I'm sorry" with big words or tears. But she shows up. And that, I've learned, is enough. I haven't spoken to my parents. Last I heard, they moved to Florida. My mother runs a nonprofit about family excellence. My father blogs about merit-based patriotism. They live loudly now, but they said nothing when I needed them most. I don't hate them. I don't think about them much. What I think about are the things they never gave me. Not approval, not warmth, just space. The freedom to be proud without being punished for it. That I had to give myself. And now I do. I keep one photo on my desk. It's not of Vanessa, not of me in uniform. It's of the girl I gave the medal to, eyes wide, hands, trembling metal clutched like a lifeline. She looked like me once, and now maybe she won't have to wait as long to be seen. Every day I walk past that photo, I remember what it felt like to be erased. And every day I remind myself, some of us weren't raised to be admired. We were raised to survive. But sometimes survival becomes legacy. And sometimes the sky opens, the crowd falls silent, and someone salutes you, not because you begged to be seen, but because they always knew you were never useless. You were just uninvited, until the day you arrived anyway, and the world stood still. My name is Serena Calloway. I don't wear name tags, I don't chase attention, and I definitely don't correct people when they underestimate me. I let them. That night, I was just another guest at my sister's corporate mixer, held in the lobby of a sustainability center I'd personally helped fund. Jessica didn't know that, of course. She never asked. She was in the middle of a group swirling white wine and laughing a little too loudly. "Serena," she said when someone asked. "Oh, she's still figuring life out. Last I checked, she was making candles, or consulting, or something." The group laughed politely. One woman glanced over at me and smiled like she pitied me. I didn't flinch. I never do. I sipped my drink and let the moment pass. Then the door opened and her boss walked in. He scanned the room, offered a nod to the receptionist, and turned his head just enough to see me by the window. He stopped walking. His mouth opened slightly. "You're," he said, voice uncertain, eyes wide. "You're Founder Calloway of Terrabloom." Every glass in that room paused midair, and Jessica dropped hers. I didn't say anything right away. I just placed my drink down on the table next to me, turned to face him fully, and gave the smallest of nods. "Good evening," I said. "I see we're finally being properly introduced." Growing up, I was the quiet one, the serious one, the girl who read soil chemistry books at lunch, while my younger sister Jessica choreographed talent show routines and brought home most outgoing ribbons like they were candy. She sparkled. People noticed her. Teachers remembered her. Our parents adored her, ease her charm the way she made their lives feel smoother. And me, I asked too many questions, spent too much time in the backyard digging holes to test earth pH and noting the behavior of roots in different conditions. I remember once I tried to show Dad a miniature irrigation system I built using soda bottles and medical tubing. He blinked, patted my shoulder, and turned to ask Jessica about her latest dance class. That moment stayed with me longer than it should have. At school, I found my tribe, sort of. Lab partners who didn't mind silence. Professors who encouraged my obsession with microbial networks. When I earned a full ride to study soil ecology at a Midwestern university, my mother tried to hide her disappointment behind a tight-lipped smile. "But what will you do with that?" she asked. "Is that even a real career?" By the time I turned 22, I stopped trying to explain myself. When I declined a consulting job with a chemical agriculture firm, one Dad had pulled strings to help me get, he didn't speak to me for weeks. Mom sent Jessica to talk to me, thinking she could reason me back to sense. "You're brilliant," Jessica said that day, perched on the edge of my twin bed, her perfume too strong in my tiny apartment. "But don't you want a real life? A nice salary? People who respect you?" I looked at her, and for the first time realized we didn't speak the same language. "I want to build something that matters," I said. She smiled, thin and polite. "That's great. Just don't make it so hard for yourself, okay?" I didn't respond. And a month later, I packed up everything I owned into a second-hand Jeep and drove west. No one called. No one asked where I'd gone. And for the first time, I realized being forgotten wasn't painful. It was clarifying. I rented a studio over an old hardware store in Oregon and began building Terrabloom. Quietly, slowly. I pulled grant funding from obscure environmental research circles, borrowed equipment, partnered with growers who believed in testing over marketing. I worked out of sheds, converted barns, even a shipping container once. For years, I existed as a footnote in other people's success, but the data spoke. And over time, the data shouted. By the 5th year, our systems were restoring depleted farmland across 4 states. Our tech was featured in white papers and academic panels credited anonymously to founder SC. That's how I liked it. No one could link it back to me, not my family, not Jessica, not anyone from the world that once laughed at the word ecology. But then came the conference. A major partner wanted to showcase our pilot site. They planned to host a mixer there, invite stakeholders from corporate green initiatives, including Jessica's firm. When I saw her name on the RSVP list, something in me froze. Not from fear, not resentment, from recognition. The past doesn't always call. Sometimes it shows up at your door, wearing heels and a badge, and pretending it's never met you. I confirmed attendance. Quietly. Under my full name. Let her see me now, but not through performance, through proof. And when she looked right at me that night, introduced me to her colleagues as my sister, who's kind of between things, I said nothing. Because the part of me that once needed her to see me didn't anymore. But the part of me that built something worth seeing, that part was wide awake. Tara Bloom wasn't born out of ambition. It was born out of necessity. I didn't set out to become a founder. I set out to solve a question no one else was asking. What if the problem with our food system wasn't the crops, but the soil's memory? What if decades of abuse had made the land forget how to grow? Those were the kinds of thoughts that got you laughed out of conference rooms. So I stopped asking out loud. I started building instead. The early days were raw. I coded data models by candlelight during blackouts, ate canned soup 6 days a week, lived off grant scraps, moonlighted as a copy editor for peer-reviewed journals, and crashed on lab floors more times than I can count. But the work kept calling. Soil degradation, crop resilience, microbial regeneration. I didn't want headlines. I wanted answers. By year 2, I had a prototype, a closed-loop biofeedback system that allowed nutrient-depleted land to rebuild microbial diversity without synthetic input. It worked in 1 out of 10 tests, but the 9th failure always taught me more than the one success. We launched small community farms in Oregon and New Mexico, then 2 school pilot gardens in Appalachia. No press, no splash, just results. Quiet, measurable, relentless. I hid behind initials SC in research logs, founder fields, and grant applications. My face never appeared in articles. If someone insisted on attribution, I'd redirect it to a project lead or a field technician. I didn't need the spotlight. I needed space. People assumed Tara Bloom was run by a team of anonymous academics or an eccentric think tank. I let them think that. Even as it grew, 10 employees, then 30, I kept my name off the board. No LinkedIn, no interviews. I watched colleagues win awards for papers we'd ghostwritten. I applauded from the back row, because I wasn't chasing recognition. I was chasing root systems that could survive climate collapse, and in that pursuit, I built something unshakable. We expanded to 4 research hubs each with its own microclimate simulation. I began mentoring a few young women, quiet ones like I used to be. One Lily didn't speak during her entire first internship week, but she sketched diagrams of root entanglement so precise, I thought she might have been born with a microscope for eyes. I saw myself in her, and for the first time, I didn't feel alone in the work. Somewhere in the 5th year, a global sustainability fund reached out. They wanted to sponsor a series of Tara Bloom-led field trials. It was the break we never planned for. But there was one condition: public engagement. They wanted workshops, media coverage, mixer events. My instinct screamed no. But my team, Lily included, looked at me with the kind of trust you can't betray. So I agreed. And that's how the event happened. Jessica's firm was one of the invited partners. They'd invested in Green Optics, a PR move dressed up as sustainability. She worked in communications, of course, always knew how to spin a story, even when there wasn't one. When I saw her name on the guest list, I hesitated. The urge to retreat was strong. But Lily, unaware of my past, asked me that morning, "Will you be there? I want them to see who built this." That stopped me. I said yes. Not because of Jessica, not even because of Lily, but because maybe after all these years, I was finally ready to stop hiding behind a lowercase version of myself. At the event, I wore my usual tailored slate gray, no jewelry, no title. Just a name tag that said Dr. Serena Calloway, guest collaborator. Jessica never looked twice. And that was the strangest part. To her, I was forgettable. Background noise. A sister to nod at once a year and forget again by dessert. But I had built a world she now stood inside of. And she didn't even know she owed it breath. The message came on a Thursday. One of those short, chirpy texts that read more like obligation than sentiment. "Hey, company mixer next weekend. Wanna come? Just a small thing, networking and drinks. Might be fun." It was from Jessica. No context. No follow-up. Just the kind of half-hearted invite you send to someone you barely remember you're related to. I stared at the screen longer than I care to admit. It had been almost 4 years since we last spoke. Even then, our conversation had been more posture than substance. She'd called to ask if I could edit her LinkedIn bio, since you're good with words and sciencey stuff, and I'd declined as politely as possible. Now, here she was again. Not asking how I was not offering an apology or a bridge, just extending a convenience invite. A prop seat at the table so she could say she'd included me. I almost deleted the message. Then, I saw the venue listed at the bottom. Hosted at the Klein Center Green Room 4. The Klein Center, one of TerraBloom's primary field testing hubs, renovated with our funding, operated with our data. It wasn't just a space we sponsored, it was one we built ground up with our own hands and code and stubbornness. Jessica had no idea. It was almost poetic. I replied simply, "Sure. I'll be there." The week leading up to the event, I didn't tell anyone. Not my staff, not Lily, not even the director of that site. I wanted to arrive like a question mark. No trumpet, no press badge, just me. I showed up 15 minutes before start time, as I always do, early enough to observe, late enough not to draw notice. The lobby smelled like eucalyptus and new carpet. My shoes echoed on the polished floor as I crossed to the registration table. The young woman behind the check-in desk glanced up and smiled. "Name Dr. Serena Calloway." She looked at her tablet, then blinked. "Oh, you're marked as guest collaborator. Right this way, please." Her tone shifted slightly. Warmer, curious. She gestured toward a lanyard, with a dark green badge one level above the standard name tag. I clipped it on. Inside the room pulsed with low music and corporate chatter. Platters of hors d'oeuvres floated by on trays. Someone laughed too loud near the bar, and Jessica Flawless, in a navy wrap dress, stood surrounded by a small crowd. Her hand gestures were animated, her voice, the polished purr of someone who had told the same story too many times. She spotted me, waved briefly, and then turned back to her audience. Later, when someone in her circle asked who I was, she laughed and said, "That's my sister, Serena. She's between projects right now, between projects." As if the last decade of my life had been a whim. As if the foundation of this building, the research displayed on the walls, the kids whose hands had pulled food from once dead soil just steps away meant nothing. But I didn't interrupt. I didn't correct her. I just stood by the moss wall installation, sipping sparkling water, watching them all move through a space they didn't know I built. Because I wasn't there for a scene. I was there for a shift. And I could feel it coming like air pressure before a storm. They dimmed the lights just a touch before the keynote began. A soft hush settled across the room, the clinking of glasses replaced by the low shuffle of chairs and phones sliding into pockets. Jessica took the stage first, of course. She looked the part, perfectly centered under the TerraBloom logo, with a voice smooth enough to code over anything she didn't understand. Her speech was practiced green initiatives, partnership, community-driven science. I almost admired her. Almost. And now she said, cueing the final slide, "I'd like to introduce someone very special, the founder of the technology behind this pilot site. Their innovation has transformed the way we think about sustainable soil reclamation. Please welcome." She turned toward the wings. Her smile faltered. A man in a gray suit stepped forward, Mr. Halverson, CEO of her company, and took the mic. "Tonight, we're honored to be joined by the mind behind TerraBloom's adaptive soil system, the founder themselves, one of the most elusive and impactful figures in regenerative agriculture today." He scanned the room, and then his gaze landed on me. He blinked. Just once. Then his posture changed. He took a half-step forward, microphone dipping, as if his brain was trying to catch up to his eyes. "You're," he said loud enough for the front rows to hear, "you're Founder Calloway." Every head in the room turned, some confused, some curious, some like Jessica's frozen. I stood slowly. It wasn't dramatic. There was no flourish, just quiet movement. My chair scraped the floor as I stepped out from behind it and walked toward the stage. Halverson still hadn't moved. Behind him, the LED screen displayed a looping animation of root systems growing in fractal complexity, a visual metaphor for the work I'd lived and bled for. And in that moment, for the first time, those roots felt like they had my name on them. I stopped 2 feet from the edge of the platform. "Yes," I said, calm and even. "I'm Serena Calloway." Jessica's glass slipped from her hand. It hit the floor with a sound sharper than it should have been, shattering the silence in more ways than one. No one picked it up. Halverson recovered quickly. "We're honored," he said, his voice suddenly reverent. "Truly honored to have you here." He reached for my hand. I took it. A flashbulb went off somewhere near the back. And just like that, the room exhaled. There were murmurs low and buzzing. I caught a few words: visionary, hidden genius. Wait, that's her sister Jessica hadn't moved. She stood near the back, now half lit by the green uplighting arms, crossed tightly across her chest, face pale. Someone leaned toward her, whispered something. She didn't respond. Her eyes stayed locked on me, like I'd performed some impossible trick. But I hadn't. I'd just shown up. When I was handed the mic, I didn't launch into a speech. I simply turned to the crowd and said I spent a long time believing that if my work was good enough, someone would eventually notice. Tonight I'm reminded that sometimes they do. I stepped off the stage before they could clap too hard. Back at my table, I sat slowly, pulse steady. I didn't look for Jessica. I didn't need to, because the silence around her was louder than any applause I could have asked for. I found her outside, standing beneath the soft glow of the awning lights, arms tight around herself, despite the warmth in the air. She didn't look up when I approached. For a moment, I thought about turning back, letting the night end exactly where it had on that stage in silence. But something in her posture stopped me. Not shame, not anger, uncertainty. I stepped closer. The gravel crunched under my heels. Jessica finally turned. Her voice was quieter than I remembered. "You could have told me." I raised an eyebrow, not unkindly. When she hesitated, "I don't know. Before. Years ago. At dinner, or on the phone, or you never asked." She opened her mouth, then closed it again. Her eyes searched my face like she was seeing it for the first time, not just looking, but trying to understand the shape of it beneath all the years she'd ignored. "I thought you were just drifting," she said, "doing odd jobs, avoiding real life." I nodded slowly. "You were comfortable thinking that?" That landed. Her shoulders dropped a little. "I didn't mean to." She stopped. "Tried again. I wasn't trying to diminish what you were doing. I just didn't know how big it was." "That's the thing," I said, folding my arms. "You didn't want to know. It was easier to assume I failed than to imagine I was building something without your approval." She winced. The silence stretched heavy, but not hostile. "I was jealous," she admitted, eyes fixed on the pavement. "Not of what you did. I didn't even know what it was, but of how you didn't need any of us. I always needed to be seen. Praised. You didn't." I didn't correct her. She wasn't entirely right. I had wanted to be seen desperately once, but I had grown into someone who didn't need it. That distinction was mine alone to carry. After a long pause, she reached into her bag and pulled out something small, a black leather notebook, slim and new. "I made this," she said almost sheepishly. "For your program, for the girls you mentor. It's just a draft. But I thought maybe they'd like a section on how to speak with confidence, how to explain your work without apology." I took the notebook carefully. It felt warm, like it had been held too tightly. "I remember you used to hate public speaking," I said softly. She laughed, a dry sound. "Still do. But I figured if someone had given me a way to talk about what mattered when I was 13, maybe I'd have spent less time pretending and more time learning." I didn't say thank you, not yet, but I tucked the notebook under my arm. That was enough. We didn't hug. There were no tears. Just a quiet understanding planted like a seed between us, too early to call forgiveness. But maybe a beginning. Before we parted, she looked at me again. "I don't expect you to forget everything she said, but I'd like to show up differently from now on, if you'll let me." I nodded once, and that was it. She walked to her car. I stayed under the awning a moment longer, watching the dust swirl in the light above the door. She had finally seen me. Not because I demanded it, not because I forced her to, but because I had built something she couldn't ignore. 6 months later, Jessica started volunteering twice a month at one of our rural STEM partner schools. She never made a grand announcement, never asked for recognition. She just showed up early, sleeves rolled a little uncertain, but entirely present. The first time I saw her in the greenhouse classroom, kneeling beside a girl who stammered through an explanation of a soil test, I held my breath. Jessica didn't interrupt. She waited, then said gently, "That was actually really clear. Want to try saying it again, just louder for the group?" The girl beamed. After that, Jessica began drafting communication guides for shy kids: how to speak when your hands shake, how to explain data when no one in your family understands what data even means. She sent me versions in neat PDF folders titled, "Quiet Doesn't Mean Invisible." I read every one. Sometimes I'd find her notebook on my desk with sticky notes. "Can we add a section on self-doubt?" Or, "Do you think metaphors help with technical terms?" She never used words like "sorry." She didn't need to. She was speaking in something truer now: effort. The silence between us had changed. My parents still haven't reached out. Sometimes I wonder if they ever will. But the ache I used to carry has dulled into something I no longer mistake for grief. More like memory worn smooth by time. Terra Bloom has grown more sites, more students, more data that sings hope from the dirt. But some days I walk the back fields alone, notebook in hand, and think of the girl I used to be. The one who whispered ideas into jars of red clay. The one no one applauded. She never disappeared. She just waited for the world to grow quiet enough to hear her. And now, finally it has. Not with a roar, but with roots. My name is Emma Callahan. I wore red to the Thanksgiving dinner because I knew she hated it. My mother always said that dress made me look like a politician's second wife. Too ambitious, too obvious, too much. Maybe she was right. But that night, I wanted to be seen. I hadn't stepped foot inside that house in almost 2 years. And yet, when the butler opened the door and asked for my name like I was a guest at someone else's wedding, I didn't flinch. I gave it. Calmly handed him my coat and walked into a room full of people who used to be family. They didn't look up. Not when I passed the photo wall where my face had quietly disappeared. Not when I stood beside the fireplace trying to pretend my hands weren't trembling. Not even when I sat down in the only empty chair tucked behind a buffet table like an afterthought. Dinner began, forks clinked. Logan, my older brother, bragged about his promotion. My sister Amelia laughed too loudly. My father poured another glass of wine, nodding like a man who still believed he was in control. No one said my name. Then came the fork on the wineglass. Clink, clink. I looked up. My mother stood tall in cream silk and began to speak. She called it a toast, but it wasn't. It was a warning. A monologue dressed in etiquette aimed at me, but spoken to the room. A lecture about family humility, respect, and how some daughters forget. I didn't interrupt. I just picked up my napkin. And when I stood to leave, she slapped me. Right there, in front of everyone. Logan clapped. My father sipped his wine. And that was the night I made 3 calls. By morning, their world would begin to crack. The slap burned, but not as much as the silence that followed. No one moved. No one gasped. No one reached for me. Not even out of instinct or embarrassment. They just kept eating, like it hadn't happened. Like I hadn't happened. I stepped back steady and placed my napkin on the edge of the plate. Then I walked out through the hallway that used to smell like cinnamon and pine. Past the coat rack I helped install when I was 17. Past the photographs that stopped including me 5 years ago. By the time I reached the front door, I felt nothing. No shame, no heartbreak. Just a clarity I hadn't felt in years. But this didn't start with the slap. It started 10 days earlier when a cream-colored envelope appeared in my Boston mailbox. I knew the handwriting instantly. Amelia's flawless, curated like a lifestyle brand logo. I almost threw it away without opening it. But I didn't. Inside, a handwritten invitation. Emma. We hope you'll join us for Thanksgiving this year. 3 p.m. sharp, family home. Love, Amelia. I read it once, then again. No apology, no explanation for the silence after I left. Just a neat little request like nothing had happened. I set the card down on my kitchen table and stared at it for a long time. They hadn't called when I moved. Not when I changed numbers. Not even when Mom had her surgery and I flew in from Boston to take care of her, while everyone else posted vacation photos. Now they wanted togetherness. Part of me felt the pull. That old dangerous part that still believed in second chances. That remembered tucking into Mom's lap after night terrors or learning to paint a garage floor with Dad. The part that stitched Amelia's prom dress when her designer backed out and didn't ask for credit. But another part, quieter, stronger, knew this wasn't a gesture of peace. It was a setup. Maybe to humiliate me. Maybe to prove I was the one who left, not the one who was pushed. Still, I bought a train ticket that night. Northeast Regional, Boston to Fairfield. I didn't pack much. Just a simple black coat and the red dress she hated. Not to provoke her. Not exactly. More like a reminder I was no longer the quiet one waiting to be let back in. That morning, the sky outside the train window was gunmetal gray. Cold light stretched over the rooftops, and even the conductor moved slower than usual. Across from me, a woman in her 60s wiped at her eyes with a coffee-stained napkin. We didn't speak. We didn't need to. Everyone rides trains for a reason. By the time I stepped off at Fairfield, the air had that sharp November bite, just cold enough to make you feel alive. I remember thinking this might be the last time I walk into that house as a guest. The next time I'd be walking in with a court order. I just didn't know it yet. The Callahan estate hadn't changed. Same stone lions flanking the driveway. Same trimmed hedges manicured within an inch of their lives. The kind of symmetry that looked beautiful from the outside and suffocating if you stayed too long. I stood at the front steps for longer than I meant to, just staring at the new sign above the door. Family first. Always. The old one used to say, "Welcome home." I hadn't even knocked when the door opened. A man in a black vest held a tablet and asked, "Name." Not hello, not Emma. We're glad you came. Just a cold scan of a guest list. Emma Callahan. He checked something, then stepped aside. I walked in. The scent of roasted turkey and rosemary tried its best to make things feel warm, familiar. But the warmth stopped at the walls. Inside it felt more like a showroom than a home. Every flower arranged, every cushion fluffed, every smile too polished. Then I saw the seating chart, taped to the buffet cabinet like an exhibit. My name wasn't on it, not even a +1 space, just guest, far end. I swallowed the burn rising in my chest and handed my coat to another staffer. Not a cousin, not Amelia, staff. No one turned. No one said, "Emma, you made it." They just kept clinking glasses and murmuring in curated tones. Amelia was the first to approach all pageantry and teeth. "Well, look who decided to join the living," she said, projecting the line so the whole room could hear. There was polite laughter, the kind that stings more than outright mockery. Dad gave a half nod from his armchair. Didn't rise. Logan brushed past me without a word and popped a deviled egg in his mouth like I was invisible. I found the empty chair. Back corner near the service tray. I sat without fuss. Hands folded, back straight, breathing quiet. Dinner began around 4. The turkey was perfect, the stuffing familiar. For a brief moment, I let the scent transport me to childhood, 15 years old, stealing bites from the stove, while Mom shooed me away with a wooden spoon. But it didn't last. As I reached for the cranberry sauce, I felt it every eye subtly shifting toward the head of the table. Mom stood. Her cream dress didn't wrinkle. Her fork tapped once on her wineglass. Then again. The room hushed. She smiled that hostess smile she wore like armor. Before we moved to dessert, she began. I'd like to say a few words. I already knew I was the subject even before she turned her gaze on me. I look around this room, she said sweetly, and I see loyalty. I see tradition. And I see family who understands that respect is earned, not assumed. The air tightened. In every family, she continued, there comes a time when we must remind ourselves where we come from and what we owe to one another. She didn't have to look at me. Everyone knew. Because sometimes... Her voice softened, some daughters forget. A few people chuckled. Logan smirked, arms crossed. She went on humility entitlement, how money doesn't buy respect, how success without gratitude is just noise. Each word landed like a well-aimed stone. Then she said it. Entitlement is ugly, especially in family. Logan clapped once, twice, then 3 slow times. That's Mom's best one yet, he muttered. I sat still, red dress, red wine, red heat in my chest, and then I stood. No words, just the quiet sound of my chair scraping back, and her hand coming down like judgment. I didn't slam the door. That would have been too generous, too loud. Instead, I walked out of the house like I'd never been part of it. Down the front steps through the cold November air, past the same iron gates that once felt like protection and now looked like bars. No one followed me. Not a single voice calling out. Not even to pretend. I sat on the front steps, knees tucked into my coat cheeks, still stinging from the slap. But it wasn't pain I felt. It was something colder, cleaner. Clarity! I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out my phone. My hand was steady. I scrolled past names I hadn't touched in months until I found the first one. Dorian Ashby, attorney, former trust specialist, and the one person I called 2 years ago when I started noticing things that didn't add up. He picked up on the second ring. I was wondering how long it would take, he said. Activate it, I said quietly. Everything we planned. Trust freeze, full scope, file the injunction. There was a pause as I heard him pull up documents on his end. You still have power of attorney over your mother, he said. She never revoked it. She didn't know how, I replied. And your father? Too arrogant to check exactly. You sure? I closed my eyes. By morning, I want everything locked, quietly, no media. You know me, Dorian said. I don't do noise. We hung up without goodbyes. We never needed them. The second call was to Marla Teague, a forensic accountant I met during a nonprofit audit 2 years ago. We had once joked that she'd be the one to call if the apocalypse involved spreadsheets. She answered groggy. Emma. What time is it late? I said. And I'm sorry, but I need you to pull files. She was quiet for a moment. Then, what did they do? I'm sending you photos. Ledgers, handwritten checks, cash logs. I found them in my father's study before dinner. I need cross-referencing on dates, deposits, vendor accounts. I clicked send before she could respond. A beat. If this lines up, she said, we're not talking about sloppy accounting. This is criminal. I'm not looking for wrist slaps, I said. I'll start now. You'll have a full trace report by tomorrow afternoon. I thanked her, but I don't think she heard it. She was already typing. The third call was the shortest. Ray Kingston, compliance specialist, federal level contact, no small talk. She answered with a yawn. This better be good. I didn't bother with preamble. I read her the foundation's EIN number and sent a secure Dropbox link. It contained everything: scans, flagged transactions, security logs from my parents' office network, all backed up from when I'd stayed with Mom post-surgery. She didn't ask questions. You'll get a subpoena confirmation within 48 hours, she said. That was it. No good luck, no sympathy, just precision. I put down the phone and stared at the dark window in my kitchen. My reflection looked back at me, older, quieter, sharper. My cheek was still flushed, but my eyes, they didn't blink. I made tea, chamomile, honey, muscle memory. While the kettle hissed, I thought about how silence used to be my weakness. Now it would be my weapon. And by the time the kettle clicked off, I had already started writing my next move. Not in anger, not in vengeance, but in truth. Because they hadn't just slapped me. They'd handed me a mirror, and I finally decided to hold it up. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was overwhelmed, but because my mind was clean, organized, surgical. I stayed up reading, cross-referencing names, reviewing screenshots, voice memos, digital notes I'd filed under a folder called For When They Crossed the Line. At 3:17 a.m., my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I almost let it ring out until I saw the area code, Newark. Then I heard the voice. Emma Callahan. It was a woman, soft, deliberate. You don't know me, but I knew your Aunt Vivian. I worked with her. I kept something she asked me to hold, just in case. The name landed like ice on the back of my neck. Aunt Vivian. The only person who had ever called out my father's behavior without flinching. The woman who vanished from family photos after her sudden illness. The one they buried with a eulogy that sounded more like an apology. Why now, I asked. Because tonight your name came up in a forum, she said. The trust freeze. The injunction. And I knew this was the moment. She told me to meet her in the Newark County Records Building, 4th floor, back archive room, 4 p.m. sharp. I didn't ask for more. I didn't need to. I just said I'll be there. The next day, the building was nearly empty. Gray hallways, stale air. The kind of place bureaucracy came to rot. She was waiting in the archive room, small, silver-haired, her cardigan stretched at the elbows. Her name tag read Joelle D. "You look like her," she said, voice low, "but your eyes are sharper." She pulled out a narrow folder from behind a loose panel in the filing cabinet. "Vivian told me if anything ever happened to her, or if your father tried to erase her, I had to give this to you. Only you." Inside was a thumb drive. No label, no markings, and one sheet of paper, handwritten. Emma. "If you're reading this, they've done what I feared. This isn't about inheritance, it's about identity. They used you, your name, your clean record, your silence. You were the decoy, the girl they could legally attach accounts to because you'd never ask questions." My breath caught. I stared at the drive in my hand, like it might burn through my skin. Joelle placed a hand on mine. "Play it offline. No Bluetooth, no cloud. And Emma, don't wait too long." I drove straight home. Didn't speak, didn't blink. I turned off Wi-Fi, unplugged everything, and slid the drive into my old laptop. A file blinked on the screen. Dated 2018. I clicked play. It started with static, then my father's voice. "We'll shift everything into Emma's name. She won't notice. Make it look like part of her education trust." Amelia's voice. "And if the IRS looks my mother calm as ever, she's too proud to question. She'll think it's a gift. That's her weakness." Laughter. My father again. "She was always too honest to be dangerous. That's what makes her useful." I stopped the audio. My lungs forgot how to breathe. They hadn't just forgotten me. They had designed me. I wasn't the estranged daughter. I was the shell, the paperwork, the front. I let the file play all the way through. They talked about dummy invoices, retirement accounts in Geneva, moving chunks under reporting thresholds. And me, my name was the cover. Not because they trusted me, but because I never looked behind the curtain, until now. The courthouse was colder than I expected. Not the air conditioning, but the stillness. Marble floors, polished benches, and a silence that felt like judgment before anything had even been said. I sat beside Dorian at the plaintiff's table, briefcase in my lap. Across the aisle, my father adjusted his cufflinks. My mother sat next to him, face unreadable, lips pressed into a permanent line. Logan stared straight ahead, jaw clenched like he was biting through his own tongue. Their attorney, Carlton Merritt, looked like a man who still believed his voice could shape the truth. Silver hair, expensive suit, and a smile just a little too confident. The judge entered. "This is an emergency hearing regarding the motion to reverse the freeze on the Callahan Family Trust." Carlton stood first. "Your Honor," he began, voice smooth, "my clients believe this action filed by Ms. Emma Callahan was made in retaliation, not in reason. The trust supports multiple generations. To freeze it over unverified claims would cause undue harm to innocent parties." He paused dramatically, then added, "Ms. Callahan has a well-documented emotional history. Estrangement, instability, erratic financial decisions." Dorian didn't move. He just looked at me and nodded once. I stood. "My name is Emma Callahan," I said. And I froze the trust not out of emotion, but because I had proof. I handed a folder to the clerk. "Your Honor, enclosed are 2 documents. 1, a forensic analysis of fraudulent activity tied to the trust. 2, an audio file recorded by a federal witness featuring my parents, discussing how they used my identity to shelter assets from IRS scrutiny." The judge lifted an eyebrow. "Play it." A technician cued the file, and then his voice. "Put it in Emma's name. She won't question it. That's her gift. She never asks. She thinks silence is loyalty." A long silence followed. No one moved. The judge looked at my father. "Mr. Callahan, is that your voice?" He hesitated. "Aye." "That recording, yes or no?" He exhaled. "Yes." She nodded once, made a note, then looked at Carlton. "Motion denied. The freeze remains. Furthermore, I'm referring this to federal authorities for investigation." She didn't even raise her voice. She didn't have to. Gavel strike, court adjourned. I stood, gathered my coat. As I reached the aisle, I heard him behind me. "You think this is over?" I turned. "No," I said. "I think it's finally begun." Then I walked out. And didn't look back. 3 days after the hearing, it arrived. A cream-colored envelope. No return address. Handwritten in ink that had faded slightly with time. Just 5 words on the front, in a script I hadn't seen since childhood. "To the rightful heir, BD." My breath caught. I stood in the hallway for a long moment, holding it against my chest like it might disappear if I moved too quickly. Inside was a letter and a small flash drive. The handwriting was unmistakable. My grandfather's broad looping gentle. He used to sign my report cards with little smiley faces next to the A's. Emma. If you're reading this, then you already did what I never had the courage to. You stood up to them. I saw what they did to you, the way they clipped your wings and told you it was for your own safety, how they spun silence as dignity. I should have spoken up more, but I couldn't. So I made sure one day you could. I sat down without realizing it. The letter went on explaining how he had created a separate trust, quietly, legally sound, outside their reach. Everything I built in Vermont, the land, the foundation, the cabin, it's yours. Always was. Not because of inheritance, but because you were the only one who saw people clearly and still chose to be kind. He ended it with something he used to whisper when I was little, curled in a bunk bed during a thunderstorm. Build something that lasts longer than anger. I plugged in the drive. There he was, sitting in front of the old stone fireplace, sweater loose at the sleeves, eyes soft but direct. If you're watching this, he said they've done what I feared, but I need you to know this was always meant for you, not because you were loud, but because you were right. The screen faded to black. I didn't cry. I just sat there, hands steady, heart full. And finally, for the first time in my life, I believed him. The cabin was just as he left it. Wood stacked neatly, mug still on the windowsill. The old lantern above the mantel flickered softly when I lit it that first night. I named the foundation the Lantern House. It wasn't about legacy or revenge. It was for women like me, silenced, discredited, erased. We offered financial literacy workshops, legal clinics, and a place to sit across a table and be seen. Amelia never asked for forgiveness. She just showed up one day with a casserole dish and stayed long enough to stir soup at a meeting. We never spoke about the slap or the silence, but sometimes healing doesn't need permission, just a place to begin. And when people ask how I survived them, I tell them this: I didn't break the family. I just stopped letting it break me.